Hello, 7th graders. This is Mr. Jafar Jr. Let's talk a little bit about our 7th president, Andrew Jackson. Here he is, young guy, presidential guy, and of course, old guy. And you can see his transformation through life. Jackson is considered a very influential. All right, number one, became a hero because of the Battle of New Orleans. All right, here he is right there up on top of the rock, defeating the British soundly even after the war was over. Remember, it was fought after the Treaty of Ghent was signed. He had a nickname. He was a real tough guy because of his war service, because he was from a tougher part of the country out west. This is the state of Tennessee where he was from. First Western president out of the first 7. And if you look here, here he is as a kid during the American Revolution, and that's a British officer that said, "Hey boy, come over here and shine my boot." And Jackson told him where to go, and you can see the officer raised his sword, and this is kind of a dramatization. He basically slashed his face, and Jackson had cut a scar there the rest of his life. All of these things gave him this nickname, Old Hickory. Hickory is a type of wood, type of tree, super hard to work with, super tough. All right, this is his lovely wife Rachel, and Rachel had an interesting background. She was married and then was getting a divorce, an unusual thing for the time. And when Rachel married Andrew Jackson, what she didn't know was her first husband had not yet delivered the divorce papers. Eventually they did get divorced, but this would sort of be a weak point for Jackson for a long time. He loved his wife a lot, and when people would insult her, he'd get real angry. One time, a gentleman named Dickinson insulted his wife. First they were fighting over who won a horse race. Then he insulted Rachel, and Jackson challenged him to a duel. And the story is that Dickinson fired first and shot Jackson in the chest, about an inch from his heart. Jackson then fired back. Some people say that Jackson's gun misfired, which means the bullet didn't go off. We're not sure if that's true or not, but in essence, the people that say he misfired said he cocked his gun again and shot a second time. Whether it was the first or second time, one thing's for sure, and that's this picture. There's Mr. Dickinson shot in the chest and killed. This was before he became president. It didn't have any effect on him other than maybe to add to his legend, but this certainly was another thing to make Jackson look like Old Hickory, as far as we know. Here's my favorite story about Jackson. I'll give you a second. I'll read this to you. Before the sermon, while the crowd was gathering, a wicked parrot that was a household pet got excited and commenced swearing so loud and as long as to disturb the people that it had to be carried from the house. So this is a story about Jackson's funeral. There's the word sermon, right? And consider a wake, and there's Jackson's body lying in state. And then off to the side is a stand, and there's this parrot on there. And this parrot, right? Oh, what a sweet parrot that guy is. And he is cursing like crazy, right? And where would a parrot learn how to curse? He would learn that from his owner. So Jackson was very rough around the edges, that's for sure. He's a Western guy. He wasn't very refined, and this surprised a lot of people here. Hearing a parrot swear at the guy's funeral. Jackson was a powerful president. He was not afraid to veto laws. One of the things he vetoed had to do with the National Bank. If you remember, Alexander Hamilton wanted the National Bank, thought it was necessary for the country. Jackson, if you look here in the cartoon, felt the bank was a tool for the rich. Here's all these rich guys controlled by the British and Europeans, and we have to kill the National Bank. So there he is with his sword cutting off the heads, and this is called a hydra. It's like a biblical creature, an old ancient creature that shows evil. And the ironic thing is, right here, Jackson has his name on the his picture and name on the $20 bill, which is crazy because he never would have supported that. He did not even support the National Bank. Now take a moment. Can you think who is replacing Jackson on the $20 bill? And let's see if you're right. So check it out. There she is. Harriet Tubman will take Andrew Jackson's place on the $20 bill sometime next year or two. So Jacksonian democracy is what this is called, and that's the idea that we're going to let the people rule. And this is the first election where suffrage was given to all white men, not just the rich ones. So, you know, it goes from rich white men to all white men. All right. Right, down, then you know who's coming next. Maybe you do, maybe you don't, but it would be all men. After the Civil War, black men are allowed to vote, and then women are last, all over 18, and that doesn't happen until 1920, the 19th Amendment. In any case, Jackson's called a man of the people, and he used his veto power more than any other president. He also despised Native Americans. The biggest black mark on his presidency is the fact that he hated Native Americans and tremendously mistreated them. He even disobeyed the Supreme Court, breaking the law, and that's why it was called King Andrew by his enemy. So this is what we mean. The Trail of Tears is by far his terrible legacy and a terrible part of U.S. history and treatment of Native Americans. If you look, this, I don't know if you can see it, I'm using this goofy white, but here is Cherokee writing. That's the Cherokee alphabet. These people were civilized. The Cherokee Indians, tears, even after they went peacefully. And this is another rendition of it. People moving, being forced. There's U.S. soldiers in there. You can see this guy right here. Okay, that's a U.S. soldier. Some had horses. Many walked, and you can see they're bundled up because it's freezing in many Trail of Tears. And basically the point was to get people out of the South and move them to a worthless piece of land called Oklahoma Territory, which actually used to be called Indian Territory. Gold was discovered here in western Georgia, and that's why Jackson wanted the Native Americans out, including tribes like the Cherokee. Now, the Cherokee, instead of fighting, decided to take the case to court because they had a treaty that said they could stay on their land. Little did they know, Jackson didn't really care. He said the court made their decision, now let them enforce it. He openly defied the court. Americans anyway. That's why you often see this when it comes to Jackson. Here he is stepping on the U.S. Constitution, not supporting what the Supreme Court said. They interpret the laws. They said the Native Americans can stay. Jackson moved them anyway. Here he is holding the veto power in his hands. He's stepping on the Indian Removal Act and the U.S. Bank, if you can read those, right? And his critics holding his scepter and wearing his cape and looking like a king, King Andrew I, etc. Now, in case you didn't get the notes, I'm going to show them the next couple slides. You can feel free to pause when you need it. Hope you get Jackson. Crash course. Here are your notes. Okay, again, Old Hickory became more powerful. Suffrage is the right to vote. He also used the spoils system, which means he gave his supporters jobs when they helped him get elected. All right, National Bank killed it, vetoed a lot of bills, supported a tariff. And another challenge was called the Nullification Crisis, where states said they would withdraw from the Union if they didn't like what was going on. And Jackson said, no way, you cannot do that. There is no such thing as states' rights. You cannot leave the United States. You cannot secede, in other words. But later, southern states would claim they could do this, and they actually did it. And that's why Lincoln fought the Civil War, to keep our country together and to end slavery. Pause here if you need it. And your final page, the Indian Removal Act. Have a great day.